Well, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Cecilia here to my right. Cecilia is a youth counsellor at City Life Community Care. She also works with homeless youth at risk. And she also specialises in, and she can work with children who are on the autism spectrum. So she has an expertise in that particular area. Then we have Kwong. Kwong is a psychiatrist. He actually has over 25 years of experience working in public health. He's right now working at Easton, which is great. He specialises in psychotherapy, in borderline personality disorder, and also in trauma, she comes with just a wealth of experience there. We then have Laura. Laura has over 16 years of experience working in various roles within mental health. At City Life Community Care, she actually works as the drug and alcohol counsellor within City Life Community Care for people who have abused drugs and alcohol, but she also works with people who are family members of people who abuse drug and alcohol, because that is just as important to get support if you are supporting others, and so she does a fantastic job of that. We then have Jimmy. Jimmy has over 40 years experience because he started when he was 2. And he's actually a counsellor. He's worked in universities before. He runs phenomenal courses. He runs a mental health first aid course. He runs a youth mental health first aid course. I've done his course twice, by the way. And he also runs a course called Teen to Teen, equipping people to be able to support and journey alongside people with mental health challenges. And he also works with couples and families as well. So this is a great panel of local experts with years and years experience, because again, they all started when they were 2 and 3. And so I'd just like to throw to our very first question. Maybe Kwong, we can start with you, and they're going to come up on the screen for everybody. But what is considered a mental health challenge?
Yeah, so I guess just based on our previous discussions, that we're talking about mental health challenges as another way of discussing illnesses, but we prefer that word challenge because it is actually incredibly common. And the first thing to kind of say is that, contrary to popular belief, emotions are not our enemy. So as humans, we all have emotions. That's the way that we interact with the world around us and with each other. But from there, the natural and normal emotions can actually occur on a continuum towards a point at which it becomes difficult. It can be difficult to manage, difficult to tolerate, difficult to understand. It could be excessive, etc. And at some stage, there is this kind of unknown point at which it becomes an illness, or some people call it a disorder. And there are books and many years of training that can be put into identifying particular illnesses and what to actually call something. Is this depression, or is this a bipolar disorder, or is this an eating disorder, or etc. etc. But I'm not going to go there tonight. Tonight we're just going to talk about the very basic principles. One of them is that, regardless of labels, what we really want to understand is everybody being different. Everybody is affected differently and experiences things differently. So that's what we're interested in. I don't care if it's called A, B, or C. It's about whether or not how something is affecting the person, how it's affecting their life, how it's affecting their quality of life, how it's affecting their functioning, how it affects their interaction with the people around them, how much distress it causes them, how much it worries them. That's actually what it boils down to when we talk about mental health challenges. And the other thing to recognize is that whether or not something is called a disorder or an illness as such, people recover. People actually get better. People, when they get good treatment and through having good friends and all the stuff we're talking about tonight, is people go through seasons when they're actually better. So it's not meant to be some kind of life sentence or anything like that. It's people will have good times, bad times, and I think that's really important to recognize.
Fantastic, fantastic. Maybe Cecilia, you can answer our next question, and is what are things then that can contribute to a mental health challenge?
I'd say that there are quite a few things that really contribute to mental health challenges, and they could be from mild to severe factors. So For a start, biologically, it could be that someone is born into into a family which has mental illness, or there are situations where people experience some kind of extreme trauma through childhood or life experiences, and that could also impact their mental well-being. There are situations where people also experience mental health challenges as a result of social factors, which would mean engaging in some risk-taking behaviors such as drug and alcohol use. And in situations where we have young people growing in those environments, they learn or pick up on those things and eventually end up with some of these situations. Family or connection or social connections is also something very important to all of us. I think that we are all born to connect, we are all born to live together, but sometimes situations happen, things happen, conflicts, and also impact people's well-being. So those are some of the reasons that affect other people's mental health.
Fantastic. Thank you. So maybe I can ask this to you, Jimmy. What are some of the reasons why people, you think, maybe don't talk up about mental health challenges? Like, do you think there's any sort of stigma around that? And can you speak into that? Is that all right?
Yes, Shirley, definitely the stigma is a lot greater for mental health issues. I mean, it's hard for some people to even talk about physical health issues. What about mental health? And I think that's because of our attitudes. You know, we still don't understand mental illness enough, and we tend to be quite prejudicial, and we tend to be scared of it, and all kinds of stereotypes, what we read about in the news articles, whenever there's there's something violent, the word mental comes in. So it scares people, and we really need to learn about mental health issues and mental illness. One of my participants, I run a mental health first aid course, and this course, there was a trainee, a guy who actually did a course, and he learned a lot from it. And when his friend told him about this guy they saw on the streets walking around in circles, his friend was saying, "Look at that psycho or that nut," And my friend who did the course actually said to him, "Hey, don't call him all these degrading names. This person has a mental illness or mental health problems. That we need to be more sympathetic. We need to say, what is he suffering from? Let's get him some help." So having done the course, he's been able to change his attitude. So our attitude is really about seeing mental health problems, just like physical health problems, is to do with the function of the brain. And, and we need to be respectful of any form of illness, whether it's to do with our heart, lungs, or the brain. And so there's a lot of judgment people put on. Say, for example, like if you have a cold and you can't get up and go to work, and then people are more sympathetic. But if someone has depression and they can't get up, people think they're lazy, because they don't have a cold. And so it's this whole thing about understanding what mental health problems are. And the more we can understand it, and the less we're judgmental, people will talk about it. The more compassion. So some cultures, are very shame-based, and they don't want to talk about mental health. When I was working in Monash University, we had a lot of international students. And I remember one specifically severely depressed international student, and he was suffering from depression, and he was becoming suicidal. Yet, he was told by his family that he can't go back until he finished that 1 year. He's got 1 year left, and he came from a top university, overseas. So he couldn't go back, but he couldn't function and couldn't go on. So his parents didn't want him to discontinue. In the end, he discontinued his life through suicide. What a sad thing, and he could have been able to go back, he would have recovered. So what we're saying here is faith saving is not as important as life saving. Okay? So it's important to normalize the whole point about illness. If you have mental illness, we normalize it and say it's okay not to be okay. It's important that we are curious rather than judgmental. What is depression? What is anxiety? We need to be asking these questions. So the course that I'm running is actually educating people about this basic common mental health issues, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and to know how to help the person, how to listen, how to provide help, how to link them with professionals. So it is really about that, understanding and supporting.
Fantastic. Jimmy, I love that. Face-saving versus life-saving. I think that's brilliant. Brilliant. And I love what we're doing here is that we are shedding light and we are educating and we are equipping people. So the more that we know, the better that we can handle, the better that we can understand and take away that stigma so people feel like this is a safe environment for us to speak out. Thank you. Well, our next question is, how can we identify someone who is struggling? And Kwan, can I direct that question to you? How can we identify someone who may be struggling?
One of the things that often comes up is that there needs to be some closeness to the person. So often it's the people around them, family members, who may actually be the ones that pick up the initial signs. It can be subtle, but I operate on the concept of if there's a doubt, then there's no doubt. Often what we are looking for that might indicate that somebody is actually experiencing significant mental health challenges or they're really struggling in some shape or form is that there's some kind of change. And there's some kind of change that maybe is unusual, it's uncharacteristic, it's unexplainable, sometimes even by the person themselves, even if they can explain it to you, they don't know how to explain it. So there could be things that could be specific to, I suppose, specific illnesses or specific diagnoses. I won't go into that tonight because we could be here for a couple of months. But that's perhaps the point to say there is something not quite right here, and then to, I guess, follow that up with a step to maybe seeking some professional advice. It is actually possible these days to actually research something if you suspect, I wonder if this person is depressed, and to look up what depression is about. There's information plenty around the place, and if you're doing these sorts of courses and things, that might actually help. But actually then getting some professional advice, because we're hoping that in the end it might be a false alarm, but you also might actually be picking up something really, really important. What's common to all these conditions is that to indicate that something is wrong is that something's changing, yeah, to follow that up. That's without getting into much specifics. That's the basic.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So once we have identified or we suspect someone is struggling, how then can we start a conversation that has the potential to change someone's life? And how do we ask somebody if they are struggling with mental health challenges? Jimmy, maybe you can speak into that one.
So in this course, we actually teach people how to approach, assess, and support them. And all of that, the question about, like, we watched a video on suicide. And it is getting more common, especially among young people. And we need to be able to normalize talking about it. Just like we talk about heart attacks, suicide kills, and we need to know, but suicide is more hidden. It's not as, it's obvious. So I remember having about 4 mothers after doing the course. They went back and asked the children. And out of 3 of the children said, yes, they are thinking of suicide. So the course actually brought courage to them to be able to ask this suicide question. And a lot of people don't ask because they don't know what to do. So we train people what to do. Basically what it is like with a heart attack. Basically you call an ambulance, you take them to the emergency hospital, you don't leave them alone, you bring them to the GP, you call someone they know and connect them with appropriate help. So basically this is really about helping the individual. So in order to understand what a person is going through, you've got to ask them. If you notice that they're not really looking very well and you're really concerned, and most people will say, when you ask, are you okay? They'll say what? I'm okay. Actually, they're not. So, it's about digging deeper. See, I noticed that these things are happening to you, and, I wonder how you're really feeling. So you really want to ask them how you're really feeling so that they can open up space for them to talk to you. You want to find a place that is comfortable, that is private as well. So you want to plan your conversation with them. And if they start telling you, then it's good. You actually want to listen without judging them, without interrupting and judging. A lot of us, we are hardwired to judge. So when we hear a story, we tend to have judgmental attitude. So we need to put that aside and say, I'm listening to this person. This is his life. or her life, you know, and I'm not going to judge. Don't say things like, you're too young to feel depressed, or when I was your age, you know, how did you get into this mess, you know? So some of these things that we say we can sound quite judgmental, and we want to be able to be curious and empathetic. So we say things like, it must have been really tough to feel so alone, and look, this ex-boyfriend of yours is the only one you hadn't turned to because, you know, you feel like there's no one else. So these are things that we want to show that we do understand and we don't judge. And also don't give solutions or advice too quickly. Actually, just listen to them and then perhaps let them know that there's help available and encourage them to get help. Connect them, make all the possible connections you can to get them help. And sometimes if they're quiet, just let them be silent for a while, sit with the silence. They know that you're actually with them. So this is ways of approaching them is to normalize and empathize with their feelings. Be curious, not judgmental. Be genuine, encourage help, and also give them the information. There's helplines available. There's plenty of support groups, and you want to connect them with professional help if they need to see someone. Okay?
Fantastic. Thank you, Jimmy. Actually, just straight through the centre doors and to the left, there's an Are You OK Day stand, and I've just left a whole bunch of merchandise on there. There are little business card-sized cards that actually have the 4 steps that Jimmy just talked about just how to ask, just say, are you okay? Listen without judgment, referring them on, to professional help, and then checking in if they're okay. And on the back of those particular cards have got a list of numbers of things like Beyond Blue and Lifeline. So if any time, 24 hours a day, you can give those hotlines a call, and there'll be someone who can talk you through those things. So if you are wanting any more information, or you're thinking, well, we're going too fast because we can't cover everything in such a short amount of time, please feel free. There's heaps of resources out there. City Life Community Care have got 2 stands as well. This is not supposed to be an exhaustive session that we're doing here today, but it's supposed to be the start of a conversation. And on every second seat, we've actually popped a next steps brochure, which just talks about the next steps that you can do if you are facing a mental health struggle, or someone in your family maybe, or maybe this is just for you to take home as a resource that you can provide or hand to another person. And it's just got the follow-up steps and programs and support groups that we've got to follow on from this particular weekend. So it isn't just something that you do once a year, or just one particular day of the year, but we're actually wanting to journey with people over a long period of time. So hopefully we'll be able to equip you guys and empower you guys to be able to have those conversations, and to be able to also point you in the right direction as to where to get the right help. Which actually leads me on to our next question, which is, what is the most appropriate ways to support a person with a mental health challenge? And Laura, are we able to direct that one your way?
Yeah, sure. Look, Jimmy's covered a lot of things, but adding on to that, I think it is really important to listen and to find out about what's going on for that person, whether that's Googling what's going on, or being curious and just asking questions, and listening and not being judgmental. But it's also important to journey, I guess, with people as well, and helping someone find some help. That might be, again, Googling what sort of help's out there, but maybe exploring options and going, well, you could do it this way or you could do it that way. These are some options. And maybe even attending an appointment with someone would be really helpful as well. There's lots of ways that you can do that. It might be to help them make the call, because sometimes that is quite daunting to say, I do need help. And it can be a difficult system to navigate as well. So having someone walk alongside you is helpful. Other things that you can do is providing information and resources, making sure that letting people know that there are options and they're not alone in that. And that's where the Lifeline numbers and that sort of thing can be really helpful, because you can't be everywhere and be available all the time. So it's good to have other options available as well. And there's also ways that you can seek help yourself. If you are struggling or you are overwhelmed, it's important to do that. And make sure that you look after yourself, because you can't help someone if you're overwhelmed as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. And just on the Lifeline thing, that's 24 hours a day, isn't it, Laura? Yeah. And Lifeline could be for those supporting people, but not, and as well as people who are struggling. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. So feel free to give those numbers a call yourself if you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm out of my depth. Feel free to call those numbers too. The next question is, what sort of help can we provide at City Life Church and City Life Community Care? Can I go back to you, Laura? Is that all right?
Yes, sure. As you know, we have some fantastic pastors here as well who are really willing to listen and work with you as well if you're needing that support. You've also got your life group leaders who can also access support from pastors as well, which is really helpful. At Community Care, we've actually got a lot of services available that can be a door to finding help as well. It might be something as practical as needing some help with food or financial support and that sort of thing. That can be an open door to be able to get further help and assistance. We have about 8 counsellors that are trained and experienced, and some of them are here, and they're in different areas as well. So we've most likely got someone that can meet someone's needs, and they're always willing to work with you.
Fantastic.
Oh, the other thing is...
Yeah.
It is getting trained as well is a really important thing. So the courses that are available that Jimmy's doing are really fantastic. I've done them as well, so it's really helpful. Even though I've been a professional, it has been a helpful thing to have anyway. And the other thing is I've got the parent support group, which is a support group for parents who have kids, so teens or young adults that are experiencing mental health issues. So that will be starting hopefully in October.
That's great. That's fantastic. A question is what is the reasonable expectation on someone who's untrained? So like I'm a pastor, I'm one of the youth pastors at City Life Church. I study theology and I study the Bible, but I don't have a psychology degree, or I'm not a counsellor. And obviously in 2019 we have sort of laws around not giving the wrong advice to people. And so even as a pastor, I would be considered a well undertrained individual. And so when it comes to things like mental health challenges, what is the reasonable expectation on, just a show of hands, who hasn't got a degree in psychology? Most of us. So most of us here would be untrained. What is the reasonable expectation on us? And when do you think we would have to upshift a particular situation? Cecilia, do you want to talk into that?
For most of us who do not have the qualifications or the specialized skills to support people experiencing mental health challenges, the first thing I would say is not to take on more than you can handle, but just making sure that you are very consistent in your support. I think that most people in that situation need the support for it to be consistent. So consistency is key. Being able to offer practical support, helping the person to get to the appointments, being there for the person, linking them into all the City Life groups and activities that we have, taking them out to coffee, providing them with prayer support, helping them to understand that others have gone and walked that journey and have come out the other side, and making sure that everything is well and going on for them. So there isn't really any particular expectation on our part, but being non-judgmental, being consistent, and just providing that hope. cooking meals and then, making some extra food and then sending them their way, and just being there is more than enough for us. And if it is too much for you, as my colleagues have said, seek support, because sometimes it's always good for the carer to always be very well taken care of in order to be able to provide the care and the support that they have to offer others.
Fantastic, which is actually our last question. And it is one on self-care, and it is how can we take care of ourselves when we are supporting others with a mental health challenge? Do you want to speak into that,
Yeah,
Kwong?
that's a good question. I think as a community, we're all caring and wanting to reach out and do the best we can. But as mentioned before, it's important not to take on more than you can actually handle. And I think part of that, in terms of setting boundaries, is actually about being honest with about what you can and can't do. There are things that you can do perhaps at a later time, such as doing some courses and skilling yourself up if that's something that you can do. But it doesn't come naturally to all of us. Some of us have an aptitude to kind of just being counselors and being really good with those kinds of things. But for many of us, it's actually counterintuitive. It's incredibly difficult actually to be non-judgmental in when sitting and listening to somebody. As well, the things that you may hear when you do sit and listen to somebody may actually be quite distressing. Yeah? And again, coming back to the idea that these things that we're talking about are all part on the spectrum of the human condition. So these are things that will, if it affects one person, it's going to affect another. So if it's distressing one person, it may distress you as well. It's really important to look after yourself. And when you say, how do you look after yourself? There's nothing magical or special. They're actually the general things that are important, and they're the things that we would in fact say would be useful for the person themselves who's actually the identified patient or the client or whatever you want to call them. And it's things around getting good sleep, making sure you're eating well, making sure that you're getting some activity, exercise, having good friends around you. Are you yourself talking to your life group? Are you actually able to find somebody who can actually help you debrief and perhaps even upskill you if you need? And it's about also then having being able to kind of take some time to stop, unwind, and reflect on what you can and can't do. So those things are actually really important. I want to kind of emphasize that it's really difficult to be supportive when you're actually exhausted. And some of these things you do actually have to be honest to the person about as part of the boundaries, that this is something that is part of, as I'm supporting you, I do need some time to kind of unwind and kind of have some rest as well, so I can support you better.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you. How about we thank our panel? Wonderful. Well, that comes to the end of this particular panel, but what we would love to do right now is to minister in this moment. We're going to dim the lights in just a second. And I just want to remind everybody here today, no matter if you are struggling or if you're supporting somebody, or maybe this is all new to you, that we serve a God who is sovereign, a God who is in control, a God who gives us hope, who gives us strengths in moments, and that He's actually with us through the highs and through the lows. And our prayer is that you will be able to feel the Holy Spirit minister to you, that you will be reminded that He never leaves us, He never forsakes us, and even in our lowest moments, He is there with us, He grieves with us, He celebrates with us, and He is still good. Thank you.